Hello and welcome to Podround, the brand new podcast bringing you the best royal podcastings every week. Now, normally I do a selection of 4 podcasts, but I went to just reference one of the podcasts I was looking to include, and it was taken down. So that was quite mysterious. So I'll make some inquiries as to why that happened. I won't say who it's from at the moment, but might be something, a scoop that they didn't want to let out. So I'll just be doing the 3 for today. And the first one is a new one. It's the Royal News Network podcast. And this is hosted by a lady called Brittany Provence. She appears on other podcasts, actually. She's often asked to give expert commentary. And she's the founder and the editor-in-chief of the Royal News Network. And this is a YouTube channel and a website which provides royal news, commentary, and analysis. And she is somebody that really looks on history and fashion and provides an in-depth commentary. And she frequently travels to Europe to explore royal sites. So she's a proper fan, and she's almost like a royal correspondent, really. And what she does is she gives this very detailed information. And the podcast that I've selected is one that, and you'll find it in the episode notes, all the links are there, but it's one that looks at a Netflix party that was for the launch of a program on Netflix called Beef. And it was celebrating the launch. And lo and behold, who turns up to this party but Meghan and Harry? Now, this party is hosted by a chap called Ted Sarandos, who's the CEO of Netflix, and his wife, Nicole. And what Brittany looks at in this podcast is a really deep dive into the whole photo history of this appearance of Prince Harry and Meghan and how they're looking at the party. Because if you frame it in their recent history with Netflix, they are obviously in quite an awkward scenario with Netflix, with various articles that have just come out about their relationship with Netflix. Some of them not particularly complimentary, let's say, of the dealings with Meghan and Harry, particularly Meghan. And what Brittany does in this is she went to Getty Images and she was looking at all the images, and then she noticed, quite ironically, that some of those images had actually been taken down since she started looking at all the images. So luckily she had recorded some of the images that hadn't been taken down. Now, the reason this is interesting is it's really showing that Meghan and Harry, but Meghan particularly, is trying very hard to reflect a positive image. And she looks at their body language. And it's so interesting when you see Meghan and Harry next to Ted Sarandos and Nicola, his wife, and how Meghan is holding on, gripping Nicola's hand really tight while she's leaning away from her own husband. There are other pictures of Meghan doing this sort of possessive, token-like hug of Nicola. And this is a very Meghan thing, the way that she sort of goes in for hugs. And Brittany's taking this from a very sort of body language analysis perspective. And later on, she's sort of criticizing also the dress and everything else that she's wearing. And I really like these short, sharp analyses that Brittany does of each sort of happening in royal life. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about Brittany's podcast is that she runs this thing called the Royal Court community. And if you're really, really into all things royal, this is a good community for you to look at. If you're looking at taking in a podcast and listening to and being a part of a community, it seems that Brittany has this really, really strong community aspect to her YouTube channel. And she also hosts group travel experiences. So she's advertising this group travel experience to Tuscany And she says, and of course, Florence next year. And she's encouraging her community to sign up for this particular trip. And it does sound absolutely brilliant. There's going to be food tours and wine trips and wine tasting and all that great stuff that you'd love to do in the beautiful country of Italy. From just an all-round community and an interesting podcast on the Royals to subscribe to, definitely advocate taking a look at what Brittany does with the Royal News Network.
Hi there, everyone. Lyle here from Where Pop Culture Meets PR, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that we really enjoy making Podround for you. So if you are enjoying this episode and have enjoyed episodes in the past, then please do like, subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. It really does mean the world to the team here. And please do head to the Podround Substack. Subscribe, get your comments in and everything you've heard. We really, really appreciate those comments and love reading them. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of this episode.
Now, moving on to another one of my favorites. Last time I reviewed Kinsey Schofield's podcast, I looked at her segment, which was the Heirs and Spares segment. And this time I'm looking at the Royally Unfiltered segment of her podcast. And the thing I love about Kinsey, apart from the fact that she's just generally a really interesting person and has interesting takes on things, and she's beautiful to look at as well. Sorry, Kinsey, but I had to say it. She also has really good guests, and she's brought on in this segment, she's brought on a chap called Charles Ray, who is the former Sun Royal editor, and another gentleman who's very well known in the UK, Dickie Arbiter, because he used to be the Queen's press secretary. And they offer a really interesting mix of perspectives. And I'm sure they probably came up against each other in their previous lives as adversaries. But they offer this really good sort of press secretary versus press reporter perspective. So the first item up for discussion was Charles's upcoming historic state visit to the US. And this is particularly significant because Charles is acting as a delegation on behalf of His Majesty's government. And he's been pretty much told to come by the government. And it's a tricky time because we're not particularly enjoying our special friendship with the United States. And because of the war in Iran. So there's quite a bit of discussion around that and around the fact that of what Donald Trump might do at this state visit. And apparently in the USA, according to Kinsey, there's been some speculation as to whether Donald Trump might take this as an opportunity to bring Charles together with Harry and Meghan, who he has been obviously estranged from. The guests, both Dickie Arbiter and Charles Ray, agreed that this is probably not going to happen and that Charles is there on official business. And when these state visits happen, they are timed out to the nth degree, and there really won't be any kind of downtime for him. And even if there was some downtime, Charles would need that downtime in order to rest because he is still dealing with an ongoing cancer diagnosis. And obviously that's him living with cancer. So he will need to have his treatment when he's actually in the United States. And the other thing they discuss is the fact that, you know, the only reason for anybody doing a meeting with Harry and Meghan would be just giving Harry and Meghan more credibility. And that really doesn't seem to come at the top of their priority list. Let's put it that way. So that was the first thing. And then talking of Harry, we moved on to a discussion about Harry in Australia. And obviously, Harry and Meghan are going to be doing their visit to Australia in May. And this is causing quite a few problems at the moment. One of the things they discuss here is the fact that Harry is going to be doing a talk in Melbourne on mental health in the workplace. And it's not really something that Harry has any huge creds in. Yes, mental health is something that he has talked about in the past with the Heads Together charity that him and Catherine and William all were part of, and obviously with all the work he's done around the Invictus Games. But mental health in the workplace, it's seen by particularly Charles Ray, the former royal editor, as something that he can't really give any credibility to because he hasn't had to deal with this kind of a topic. Indeed, Kinsey said that she was approached by somebody who'd gone to one of his previous speaking events in Washington, D.C., and that was about privacy. And that person reported back to Kinsey that it was really him just moaning about his own lack of privacy. And it really wasn't a thought leadership stance given to people who are paying a lot of money for these tickets. And if you look at the Melbourne event, they were talking about the fact that that event that he is speaking at, it's now starting to slash ticket prices and try to make up money via offering virtual tickets for $500, which is coming down from the $2,000 mark. The other thing they talk about is his biography on that event site, claiming that he's dedicated to a life of service. And Kinsey is not a snarky commentator, but even she had to say that, he actually left his life of service. So it's a bit rich to have a biography that talks about that. Then they move on to the Prince Andrew situation and the fact that there are news reports at the moment about the care that the royal family are taking of Andrew internally as part of the family. And also that the news has been saying that Prince Edward and Princess Anne were visiting the ex-Prince Andrew, I should say, in his new residence, which is in Marsh Farm. They're doing a wellness check on him. And they sort of moved swiftly on from that discussion into talking about the Queen and the Queen's role in how accountable or culpable was she in allowing Prince Andrew to get as far as he did. And both Dickie Arbiter and Charles Ray have been in the presence of Prince Andrew and indeed the Queen, obviously with Dickie Arbiter because he was her press secretary. And I think both were pretty damning of Andrew and talking about him being quite rude and arrogant. And to be honest, Charles Ray, being on the press side, really wants to see him being taken to account. And so there's some interesting discussion there. Finally, they talk a little bit about the fact that Meghan is also attempting to go on the paid speaker circuit, but and the fact that she's doing this wellness weekend in Australia at Coogee Beach and charging 3,000 Australian dollars for the joy of that. And that really isn't something that's going down very well with Kinsey and her guests. The final thing they talk about on the podcast, which I thought was really good, was this April the 1st prank that was done. And this was with a chap called Larry Emdur, who's a broadcaster in Australia. And he did this April Fool's prank where he said that he was going to get the royal exclusive interview and Meghan was going to come and interview with him. And they discussed the relative merits of whether that was a good prank to do. Kinsey herself fell for it. So she was saying, well, I fell for it. But both Dickie Arbiter and Charles Ray were a bit more skeptical and saying, this is actually damaging Larry Emder's credibility, that you can't expect a serious broadcaster to do a prank like that and then listen to him going into some details about something that's really important the next minute. They felt that he'd ruined his own credibility with that. I don't know. I think that's a bit harsh. I think every kind of station and people, lots and lots of pranks were us on YouTube, for example. So I think they're a bit harsh on him. I thought it's quite funny. And they did actually speculate as to whether Meghan should actually go on his show just to show that she's got a sense of humour or go and appear on another show to cock a snoop at him. But we'll see.
Hi there, everyone. Lyle here again from Where Pop Culture Meets PR. We hope you're enjoying this latest episode of Podround, but I would just like to take this opportunity to tell you about Where Pop Culture Meets PR, which is an unfiltered journey into the world of modern communications where nothing is off the record. From celebrity crises to brand blunders, media spin and viral moments, we take a sharp look at reputation, media, and the stories shaping public life. Drawing on decades of PR and media experience, we go beyond the headlines and break it all down with a healthy dose of insight, humour, and a little bit of chaos. Join us to decode the power of public relations and why it's so much more than spin. That's Where Pop Culture Meets PR, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of this episode.
And my final show that I'm reviewing today, again, it's another favorite, but it's the reason I've come back to this is I wanted to talk about the Vintage Read podcast with Shauna Kay, because it's very timely at the moment, because she is the queen of podcasting from Australia. And that is where Harry and Meghan is going. So she dedicates this podcast to this whole Australian tour. And she's giving us the real news from Australian people and how they feel. And importantly, how she feels. And she is really, really riled up. She's very cross about the fact that these two are coming to Australia and pretending to do a pseudo-Royal tour. But all the time, she said, and I quote, "I'm the one paying for these bozos." And the reason she's saying that is that they're going to have to pay for their tour costs, the policing and the safety costs and all of the traffic management costs out of the taxpayer's wallet. And this is not a royal tour. And Shauna goes on to talk about the fact that this is royal imagery that they're using. They are, for example, their own secretary, their press secretary, Liam Maguire, is sending out notes to press about this tour, saying on one hand, it's in line with all their philanthropic efforts and showing where they're going to be visiting, like shelters and seeing the veterans and, you know, just generally visiting sort of different outlets that are in line with their own philanthropic efforts and making that look like a royal tour, but at the same time talking about the fact that they're going to be doing these paid events like the wellness weekend in Coogee Beach at the Intercontinental Hotel there, and obviously Prince Harry's speaking slot at this workplace mental health conference. Now, this, Shauna says, is absolutely outrageous because Liam Maguire has put in his notes question and answer briefing of all the questions he thinks he's going to, or they are going to be asked by the press, or the press might ask. And in that Q&A, and it's not an unusual thing for press secretaries to do this, it's a very usual thing for them to not only brief the people who are going, but also brief the press that are coming to any event. Now, in this Q&A, he asked the question about public funding from the Australian pockets of the taxpayers. And he says, absolutely not. This is all being funded privately by Meghan and Harry. But Shauna, and this is why she's such a great podcast to listen to, she does forensic evidence detailing and she goes right into it. And she has found out not only from the New South Wales police, but also from the Victoria police, that there are costs that are going to have to come out of the taxpayer's pocket. And the police have told them this. And they have no more told them this, but they've also said that there is no cost recovery in place. And that means that they aren't going to try and get that money back from Harry and Meghan. And Shauna is up in arms about this because she says, and I quote her again, that the Australians are being made to roll over like a puppy dog for tummy tickles. She really sees this as a propaganda exercise for them. She says that they're going to generate revenue, they're going to enhance their brand, they're going to also expand their business off the back of the Australian taxpayer, because Meghan has basically registered her trademarks for all her as ever line of goods so that she can sell them to Australians. So Shauna's view is very strongly that not only is she going to come and sell all her wares to Australians, not only is she going to come and make Australians pay to come and see her talk and spend an hour in her company for 3,000 Australian dollars, but also she's going to make Australian taxpayers foot the bill for her very visit. And she also says that Liam Maguire's Q&A document and the notes are pretty sneering and rude, to quote her as well. The other thing that Shauna does, which I really, really enjoyed, is she compares and contrasts this royal, in inverted commas, visit with the visits of royals like Zara Tindall and Mike Tindall, Princess Anne's daughter and son-in-law, and they are very popular in Australia, and they come over every year for an obviously commercial venture that they do with Magic Millions there. And then Zara does her own philanthropic work with horses. She does her own charitable work with horses, but she doesn't publicize it. But people do know about it, and they don't claim this sort of charity status. They don't claim to be good people doing great works. They just do what they do, come in every year, and they're part of the furniture now, and people love and respect them. So Shauna can give real perspective of how a real Australian monarchy loving as well. Don't get me wrong. Shauna is not there to beat up Harry and Meghan for no reason at all. She loves the monarchy. And this is the really interesting part of this, because Shauna knows how important it is for the monarchy, for the existence of the monarchy, to keep their close relationship with Australia as a Commonwealth country of theirs. So Shauna is actually normally flying the flag for the monarchy. She really wants us to be great in that. So that's the lovely Shauna Kay, who I am a massive fan of, as you've probably, if you've listened to my previous pods on Podround, you've probably gathered that. So thank you also for listening to Podround. We are first and foremost pod fans, and we love all things podcasts, and we're going to be doing this in many genres, but to start with, we're concentrating on the royals and royal podcasts, and we'll be taking deep dives into other podcasts and other subjects down the line, starting with the world of entertainment. You can find us at Substack, on YouTube, at Podround by searching on Podround, or any of the other places where you listen to your podcasts, whether that be Spotify or Apple or any others. So do find us and drop us a comment. Please do keep those comments coming, because we do get ideas for different podcasts to follow. And we did for the Royal News Network. That was a suggestion this week. So please do keep comments coming so we can get lots of inspiration from you. So I'll see you next time.